My name is Avery Collins. I'm 28 years old, born and raised in Sacramento, California, a place where the sun never seems to set and quiet suburban homes often hide more than outsiders could ever imagine. If someone once said I was the ideal daughter, polite, accomplished, caring, I used to believe that would be enough to be loved. But it wasn't. In my family, kindness went unnoticed, and everyone else's mistakes somehow wore my name. I'm the middle child of three siblings. Above me is Caleb, 32, the golden boy the whole family praises simply because he's the sun. Below me is Emma, 25, the little angel who could do no wrong in Mom's eyes. And me? I was the one blamed for everything, every mistake, every failure, every argument, as if I was born just to carry the weight of everyone else's anger. I remember the day everything shattered like it was yesterday. It was a sweltering Sunday afternoon in April. My family had gathered at my parents' house. Our yearly reunion that I never dared skip, even though it always felt more like marching into battle than coming home. I'd brought an apple pie I'd made myself. Dad used to love it, hoping it would ease the tension. But I was wrong. So wrong. Everyone was seated around the dining table, the air thick with fake cheer. Caleb bragged about his new job like he was the savior of the financial world. Emma had just gotten a raise, and Mom beamed with pride. I joined in, congratulating them, only to meet Dad's cold stare. "So what about you? Still doing that fluffy advertising gig?" he asked with contempt. I smiled gently. "I just got promoted, actually. I'm leading a campaign expansion to the East Coast." Before I could finish, Caleb scoffed. "A campaign? Sounds like some trick to scam customers." I stayed silent. I was used to this. Whatever I did was always dismissed. But what came next still knocked the breath out of me. Mom suddenly sighed and set her chopsticks down. "Here's the thing. We're going to have to sell the land in Auburn to pay off the bank loan. And it all started because of the changes you pushed." I blinked, confused. "I don't understand. What does that have to do with me?" "The website you made for Dad's furniture store," Emma snapped, her eyes blazing. "The old customers stopped coming back. Dad had to borrow money to make up for it, and now we're about to lose everything." I felt my blood run cold. The website I'd built for free, after hours from my main job, just to help our family store catch up in the digital age? And now they were dumping it all on me? "The numbers don't lie," I said, trying to stay calm. "Website traffic went up 40%, online orders doubled." "Shut up!" Dad roared, slamming his fist on the table, shattering a dessert plate. "You think you know everything? You're the reason we're in this mess." I stood up, my voice shaking. "Dad, I was just trying to help." "Get out, Avery," he yelled. "You ruined our lives. I don't want to see your face here ever again." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Mom looked down. Emma crossed her arms tightly. Caleb stared off to the side. No one spoke up for me. I turned and walked out of the house that once felt like the safest place in my childhood, now turned into a cage lined with thorns. No one called after me. "No, I'm sorry. No, please don't go." Just the heavy thud of the door slamming shut behind me, and in that moment, I knew. I no longer belonged there. I don't remember exactly when I was first blamed for something I didn't do, but I remember the feeling clearly. A chill down my spine in the middle of summer, as if every pair of eyes in the room turned to strike. Not because of what I had done, but because of what I hadn't. When I was 6, Caleb broke the kitchen window while playing catch with Emma in the backyard. The glass shattered, blood dripped from his hand. Mom came running, shouting, "What happened?" Caleb didn't hesitate. He pointed right at me, sitting several feet away, scribbling with chalk on the sidewalk, and said, "Avery did it." I didn't understand why he lied. I remember stammering, "It wasn't me," but no one listened. Mom dragged me to my room and scolded me hard. "You're always causing trouble. You don't act like a girl at all," she yelled. I sat in the corner of that room the whole afternoon, ashamed and confused. That feeling of injustice wasn't temporary. It was the beginning of a lifelong sentence. Over the years, anything that went wrong somehow became my fault. If Emma forgot her homework, Mom would ask, "Did you distract her with games again?" If Dad forgot to pay the electric bill, he'd snap, "You're the one blasting the AC all day. Who do you think pays for that?" The more I tried, the easier I became their scapegoat. And I tried so hard. I studied until my eyes were red every night. I joined the debate team, served as student council secretary, and by junior year, I was the top student in my entire class. But at home, none of that ever got mentioned. I remember the time I was chosen to give the graduation speech at my high school ceremony. I excitedly handed out invitations to the whole family. "The ceremony is at 7 p.m. on Friday. I really hope everyone can come." Emma scoffed. "I have a group hangout at a friend's place that night. Should I cancel?" My mom gave a half smile and shrugged. "It's just graduation. Don't make a big deal out of it." That night, I stood alone on stage, looking out at the guest seats, the ones reserved for my family, still completely empty. I didn't cry. I had learned how to swallow tears, how to put on a calm face like I hadn't been expecting anything at all. Then came college application season. I applied to several schools, not because I wanted to be far from home, but because I craved a place where I could just be myself, not a shadow or a shield for someone else's mistakes. When the acceptance letter from the University of Chicago arrived, with a 75% scholarship, I nearly fainted from joy. I rushed downstairs, waving the letter. "I got in, and they gave me a scholarship." Caleb looked up from the couch and muttered, "Another one chasing useless dreams." Dad folded his newspaper and sighed. "A scholarship won't cover airfare, dorms, or living costs. You think money falls from the sky?" And Mom? She only asked, "What about Emma? She says she doesn't like being home alone. If you go, who's going to help me make sure she studies?" I stood frozen in the middle of the room, one question echoing in my head. Why can't they see what I'm trying so hard for? No one said congratulations. No one asked what I wanted. Not a single person. I decided to go anyway. Quietly. I handled the paperwork myself, took out loans for the rest, and got a part-time job at the campus library to cover my expenses. Every time I called home, Mom would tell me Emma was falling behind in school. "Maybe because she misses you." I understood the message behind those words. I always did. They didn't need me around, but they always needed someone to blame. And that someone was always me. Life in Chicago was both liberating and incredibly hard. Every day I had to learn how to live without my family, without the familiar judgments. But deep down, I still longed for just one kind word from them. One time where Dad might say, "I'm proud of you." But I didn't just do well. I excelled. I was at the top of my major in digital communications, served as a teaching assistant to my advisor, and earned an internship at one of Chicago's top marketing firms, Clearframe Media. That opportunity became the stepping stone to my first full-time job after graduation. At 24, I officially became a content strategist at Clearframe's Los Angeles branch. But then something pulled me back. Sacramento. I told everyone I wanted to be closer to family, to slow down after years of chasing goals. But the truth? I just wanted to reconnect. I hoped they'd finally see that I wasn't the invisible Avery they once overlooked. I returned and took a job at a local media company, Nova Peak Creative, which was launching a new digital content department. The pay wasn't as high as in LA, but I had full control over strategy, and it gave me a real sense of creating something meaningful. I rented a small apartment about 15 minutes from my parents' house. Every week I'd visit for dinner, bringing fresh bread or a homemade salad. I'd ask Caleb about his banking job, compliment Emma on her latest social media photo. I convinced myself that if I stayed patient, they would change. One evening, after clearing the table, Mom looked at me and said, "You really don't have to go overboard, Avery. It feels like you're trying to win points." I froze for a second, then gave a soft smile without replying. But a part of me broke. I just wanted them to see that I'd grown, that I cared, that I listened. And yet, to them, I was still the one trying too hard. Another time, I invited the whole family to my company's presentation on a community media project I was leading. I arranged reserved seats with name cards for each of them and sent out invitations complete with a seating chart. A small gesture that felt important to me. I waited nervously for them to show up. Only Emma came. She stayed for about 20 minutes and then left, saying the lights were giving her a headache. I remember standing in the lobby after the presentation, watching others take group photos and chat happily. Meanwhile, I held my family's name cards in my hands, unsure whether to tuck them away or toss them in the trash. Calls from Mom afterward only focused on how Emma needed help with job training, how Caleb had just lost his assistant manager position, or how Dad was stressed over declining sales at the furniture store. My stories were always the leftover scraps of the conversation, if they were mentioned at all. I don't blame them, at least I tried not to, but the heartbreaking part was they never even noticed how hard I was trying to belong. Then one day, my dad called me for the first time in years. His voice was deep and cold. "Are you free? I need to ask you something." That call felt like the past knocking on my door without warning. Even though I had taught myself not to expect anything from him, that husky voice on the other end still made me freeze. "The shop's in a bit of trouble. I thought maybe you could help." Collins Woodcrafts, our family's three-generation furniture store, used to be my dad David Collins' pride and joy. Located in a worn-down shopping center in Sacramento, it was once booming back in the 90s. Now, it was empty, the sign faded, and not a single online order in sight. I stopped by the store that weekend. The familiar scent of pine wood was still there, but it couldn't cover the stagnant, cluttered air. The classic-style cabinets were covered in dust, and the order log sat blank. "We need to modernize," I said after looking around. "You need a website, social media accounts, and a marketing campaign." My dad frowned, as if I just suggested he switch careers. "Back in the day, we didn't need that nonsense. Loyal customers came on their own." "Well, it's not back in the day anymore," I replied. "If we don't adapt, we'll be left behind." I knew I was stepping into a minefield, but I truly wanted to help. Maybe, just maybe, if I could save the one thing that meant everything to them, they'd finally see that I mattered too. For the next 3 weeks, I spent every evening after work designing a website, writing product descriptions, planning Facebook and Google ads. I hired a product photographer with my own money. I uploaded product photos to Instagram, replied to every comment, every customer message, and then the results started showing. This month we got 12 online orders, my mom texted one evening. Someone from Arizona even ordered a kitchen cabinet. I smiled. That feeling of being acknowledged, even just a little, meant more to me than any bonus at work. But then I discovered something wasn't right. One afternoon, during a visit to discuss a new promotion, I found my mom sitting alone in the office, her face pale. "What's wrong, Mom?" She handed me a paper, the store's bank statement. I stared at the red numbers bleeding down the page. The store had borrowed over $120,000 from 3 different sources, including a high-interest finance company. "We started borrowing during the pandemic," she said, voice trembling. "We thought sales would bounce back, but the losses just kept piling up." "Does Dad know about this?" "He thought if he kept it hidden, you wouldn't worry." I was stunned. All my efforts to promote the store felt like a flimsy bandage on a festering wound. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned until I finally sat down and wrote my dad a long email. In it, I offered to help restructure the finances, but only under clear conditions. I would need full access to all financial records. Any expense over $1,000 would require agreement from both me and my parents. If further borrowing was needed, I would only co-sign under transparent, clearly defined terms. The next morning, I showed up at the store. My dad held a printed copy of my email, his eyes dark. "You're setting conditions for your own parents now." "I'm protecting us from bankruptcy, Dad," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing it for family." He stayed silent for a long time, then finally nodded. "All right, but if this doesn't work, then I'll take responsibility," I said before he could finish. "I understand." I contacted the bank to secure a refinancing loan, with a lower interest rate and a longer term. With my credit score and steady job at Nova Peak, I qualified as a guarantor. I signed the papers, and I had no idea that with that one signature, I had just tied my life to a mess I could never have imagined. 3 months after the loan was disbursed, I began to notice strange signs. It started with a few strange transactions on the statements. Cash withdrawals of $1,500 to $2,000 with no clear descriptions and no ties to any vendors in the system. I asked Mom and she just shook her head. "Probably your dad paying some delivery fees." But the numbers kept growing. A week later, there was a $3,800 withdrawal from an ATM nearly 20 miles from the store, right when I was away on a 2-day work trip. When I asked to look into it more closely, Dad snapped. "You think you're auditing your own father now? Who do you think built this store from nothing, Avery?" I backed off, but I didn't stop tracking. I built a detailed spreadsheet comparing expenses against supplier invoices, online orders, and payroll. What I found made my blood run cold. Over $28,000 had vanished in just 6 weeks. I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. That Friday afternoon, I asked the whole family to meet at the store. I laid out what I had found: statements, transaction logs, revenue comparisons, printed clearly and neatly. No one could deny it. My father sat in silence, arms crossed, his face frozen. Mom was trembling, eyes watery. I asked directly, "Dad, I need to know, where did the money go?" The silence in the room stretched for what felt like hours. Then he finally looked up, eyes both defiant and exhausted. "The casino." The room seemed to freeze over. My mother covered her mouth. Emma exhaled like someone had punched her in the chest. "Since when?" I asked. "Almost a year now. At first it was just a few trips to Reno with old friends, but the more I lost, the more I wanted to win it back. Then you brought up refinancing. I thought with extra money I could make it all back." I gripped the edge of the table to keep from crying. "That $100,000, you used that to gamble?" He nodded. "Mostly cards, some sports betting. I had a plan, but it got out of hand." A plan? I'd never seen a plan destroy a family like this. Emma, usually silent in family meetings, suddenly turned to me. "So when did you know about all this?" I blinked. "I only found out the full picture last week." "But you signed as guarantor, didn't you? Why didn't you watch things more closely?" she snapped. "You set the terms, reviewed the statements, talked about protecting the family, remember?" I looked at Mom, hoping she'd speak up, but she just lowered her gaze. "You should have caught it earlier, Avery. Maybe we could have saved the store." I stood, feeling like my throat was being crushed. "Are you even hearing yourselves? Dad's the one who did this. He made the withdrawals. I was deceived just like all of you. Why am I, once again, the one expected to take the fall?" No one replied. The silence was suffocating. That night, I sat in my car for over an hour before going back to my apartment. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could they twist this all back onto me, even when I was the one who saved them from bankruptcy? Worse yet, I had tied myself to a loan that could destroy my entire career. I called a lawyer, an old friend from college, to ask for advice on protecting my personal assets if the store defaulted. He paused, then said, You'll need to review every clause in the contract. If your dad misused the funds, it may be possible to prove you were misled when you signed. But be prepared. This could get messy, especially with family involved. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I understood. And I also knew a bigger confrontation was coming. Mom's message came that Tuesday night after work. Family meeting this Friday at 7 p.m. at Uncle Tom's. It's important. You must be there. No emojis, no how are you, not even an exclamation mark like she usually used. I read the cold line over and over, a sinking feeling in my gut. My family had never held a meeting at Uncle Tom's house. He was Dad's older brother, living about 30 minutes outside Sacramento. The last time I'd been there was Christmas, 4 years ago. After that, just excuses. I sent back a short reply. "What's this about, Mom?" She only wrote 2 words. "Just come." Friday, I parked in front of the old red brick house, my heart pounding like a war drum. I had never been this afraid to step into a place so familiar. Caleb's car, Emma's, Uncle Tom's, Aunt Julia's, even my grandparents were all lined up tightly on the driveway. The moment I opened the door and stepped inside, all conversations stopped. Instantly, they hadn't invited me to talk. They had invited me to be judged. The living room was packed. Dad sat in the center with Mom beside him, looking hollowed out and 10 years older. Caleb leaned against the fireplace. Emma stood arms crossed by the coffee table, avoiding eye contact. No one offered me a seat. "Finally, she's here," Dad said, his voice hoarse and sharp like a blade. "Now we can begin." "Begin what?" I asked, though deep down I already had a feeling. "This meeting is to address the serious consequences of your actions," Uncle Tom said, eyes unblinking. I stared. "Consequences? What are you all talking about?" Emma pulled out a stack of color-printed pages, screenshots of the website I had designed, the store's Instagram posts, even the ad campaigns I'd run. "You changed everything without consulting anyone," she said, like reading out charges. "The modern style, the bold colors, the marked-up pricing. Regular customers say the store feels like some New York showroom now." They stopped coming. "But online orders have doubled," I protested. "The data is clear. I have reports." "We don't need reports to see the stores empty," Caleb cut in, voice dripping with mockery. "You're too full of yourself. Thought you were so smart you pushed Dad into debt." My throat tightened. I never pushed anyone. Dad signed the loan after I clearly laid out the conditions. "Those conditions were a trap," Dad growled. "You forced your father into a position of dependence, made him ask for permission on every dollar. That stress, that is what pushed me over the edge." "I didn't make you gamble," I said, chilled to my core. "You chose that." "But if you hadn't applied so much pressure," Mom interjected, "he wouldn't have been that desperate. This family didn't need to end up like this." Ah. I looked around the room. Every face nodded in agreement. No one was on my side, not a single soul. "I spent my life trying to help," I whispered. "Dozens of hours after work just to save this store. I paid for ads, product photography, created strategies, all for free. And now you want to blame me?" My grandfather, the man who once carried me when I was 4, who used to call me his bright little girl, only sighed and said, "You've got talent, but that talent has hurt this family." I trembled. "So what do you want? For me to disappear?" "No need to ask," Dad said coldly, rising to his feet. "You've done enough, Avery. We have nothing more to say. From now on, you are no longer part of this family." I couldn't speak. Mom looked down. Emma turned away. Caleb smirked quietly. They had made their choice. I placed the folder on the table, my final silent offering of futile kindness, then turned my back and walked out of the room full of relatives, colder than a meat locker. No one called after me. That night, after what felt more like a sentencing than a meeting, I drove home in complete silence. No music, no calls, no clear thoughts, just the sound of the engine and the thudding of my heart. When I pulled up to my apartment, I sat in the car for nearly an hour, hands still resting on the wheel. For the first time in a long time, I felt an unbearable emptiness. Not anger, not pain, just a void in my chest I didn't know how to fill. I walked inside, turned on the kitchen light, and looked around the tidy apartment I had once tried to decorate to feel warm and inviting for when Mom visited. Now that light only illuminated a cold truth. I had been living to be accepted, not to be free. I laid my head on the dining table, and I cried. I cried for all the times I was blamed without cause. For my 11th birthday party that was canceled because Caleb broke the TV and I was grounded. For the day I got the scholarship letter and Mom only said, "Don't fly too high or the fall will hurt." For the graduation no one attended. For every unanswered congratulatory message. For the girl who once believed that being good would be enough to be loved. That night, I wrote a list. Not of tasks, but of every moment in my life where I had been hurt by the very people called family. The list took up 4 full pages. And at the bottom of the page, I wrote a single line. What if I cut ties completely? Not slipping away in silence like before, but truly leaving. No warnings, no looking back. The next morning, I sent an email to the head of HR with the subject line, "Request to transfer to Seattle branch." 3 hours later, I got a call from my department manager. She laughed softly over the phone. "I knew this day would come. You deserve a fresh start." Seattle wasn't a random choice. I had visited 2 years earlier on a short business trip and felt an odd sense of peace walking those rainy streets where no one knew my name. I began the process of leaving in an organized way. Called the electric, water, and internet companies to cancel service at the end of the month, registered for a new phone number for the first time in 10 years. Bought a one-way ticket to Seattle, choosing an early morning flight known to no one. Signed up for a cloud storage service to back up all my work documents. And most importantly, I allowed myself to feel again, to tell myself I was not wrong. On my last day in Sacramento, I left an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a single note. "I no longer want to be a shadow in my own story. I'm going to find another light. Don't call, don't text, don't look for me. Avery." Attached was my lawyer's business card, just in case they needed to discuss the loan or financial obligations. No emotion, no bitterness, just a necessary end. Seattle welcomed me with rain, not cold, not gloomy, but gentle, like a late apology from life itself. I rented a small studio in Capitol Hill, modest and simple, with a window that looked out on maple trees just beginning to turn red. No one knew who my family was. No one cared about my past. And I realized that's exactly what I needed. That first night in my new apartment, I curled up on the couch, hugging a pillow that didn't smell like home, and for the first time in years, I slept. No dreams, no nightmares, no waking up to a ringing phone. I didn't know where this new life would take me, but I knew one thing. I had chosen myself, and that was the best decision I'd ever made. Seattle, despite my early fears, wasn't lonely. Just a few days after moving, I stepped into a small cafe called Willow Bean on the corner of 12th and Pine. It smelled faintly of cinnamon, with olive green walls and golden lights that felt like a sunset. I brought my laptop, sipping coffee, reminding myself that life had turned a new page. "First time here?" a woman's voice asked beside me. I looked up to see a woman around 30, with short hair and kind, smiling eyes. She wore a hoodie that read, "Empathy is a superpower," and had a blooming lotus tattoo on her left arm. Yeah, I nodded. "I'm Sophia, the manager here. Need Wi-Fi or a tip on the daily special?" She winked. I laughed, for the first time in weeks. From that day on, Willow Bean became my morning ritual. Not long after, Sophia introduced me to her close friends, including Jessica, a Puerto Rican woman who used to teach literature and now wrote poetry and hosted a podcast about healing from emotional trauma. We clicked almost instantly. One evening during an open mic poetry night at a cozy bar near Fremont, Jessica turned to me and asked, "Have you ever done something just for yourself, not to be accepted, but simply because you loved it?" I froze. The question was simple, but it struck at an empty place I'd always avoided. I didn't have an answer right then. But that night, sitting quietly on my apartment floor, hugging a pillow, I realized, for years, I'd chosen my clothes, cut my hair, cooked meals, even picked books based on someone else's expectations. I had lived like a mirror, reflecting what others wanted to see, never who I truly was. The next morning, I signed up for a pottery class at the community center near Green Lake. My hands trembled as I shaped my first pieces of clay, awkward, uneven. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I had anything to prove. I made a lopsided bowl, its glaze uneven, the rim chubby and slanted like a crooked smile. And I loved it, not because it was beautiful, but because it was mine. That weekend, Sophia invited me to join an independent women's hiking group. We climbed Rattlesnake Ledge together. Standing at the summit, looking down at the deep green lake below, I took a long, deep breath. I had never hiked back in Sacramento. "Girls shouldn't be messing around like that," my father once said. But here I was, conquering the fear of being judged. Jessica later pulled me along to volunteer at an animal rescue center, where I spent hours cleaning cat enclosures, walking dogs, and playing with abandoned kittens. A little black pup named Theo would curl up in my lap every time I sat down. Slowly, I began to love the quiet that only animals understand. No judgment, no expectations, just presence. One evening in my apartment, I opened my closet and realized it was full of clothes that had once fit the image others had assigned me. I packed up most of them and brought the boxes to a donation center. I also started listening to new music, gentle indie tracks, sometimes instrumental, sometimes jazz. No more Caleb's blaring noise, no more guilt-ridden tunes from my mom's morning kitchen. Just my own voice and the rhythm of a new life. Still, the longing didn't vanish overnight. I would sometimes catch glimpses of families having dinner through strangers' windows and feel a pang. I still dreamed of the old room, the wooden chair where my dad once read the paper. But every morning I woke up, I felt a little more grateful that I had dared to walk away. I was relearning how to love myself. Not quickly, not perfectly, but step by step I was becoming me. Not a warped version of the good daughter, but the real Avery. A month after I left Sacramento, my new phone remained quiet as a still lake. No texts, no calls, no familiar voices from the past invading my new world. I thought I had finally escaped, until I made the mistake of logging into my old email to retrieve some untransferred work files, and there it was. An incoming storm. 93 unread emails, over 40 missed call records from the old number's locator service, and a string of chaotic messages. I stared at the screen in silence. From Emma Collins. "Dad's been arrested. I'm not joking. He's charged with bank fraud." From Mom. "Are you okay? I know you're angry, but this is getting out of hand. Please reach out." From Kayla. "Police took the financial records. They're asking about the loan. Your name is on it." My heart pounded. I read each line, eyes glued to the truth unraveling before me. My dad had been arrested for falsifying financial documents during the loan application I had co-signed. He hadn't just withdrawn cash. He had lied about his income, hidden previous debts, and used my name as a shield. I didn't know what shook me more, the blatant betrayal or the fact that I had once trusted him. The most recent message was from Emma, her first time reaching out since that infamous family meeting. "Avery, You can't abandon us now. The lawyer says you have to testify. If not, Dad could get a serious sentence. You co-signed. You're responsible. Before I could respond, the phone rang, an unknown number with a Sacramento area code. I hesitated, then picked up. So you finally picked up? Emma said, her voice sharp and weary. I stayed silent. You have to come back, she continued. We need you to testify that the loan was legit. Dad's going to trial if no one confirms he didn't commit fraud. Emma, I interrupted, my voice surprisingly calm. I don't know what Dad did after I signed, and if there was wrongdoing, I can't testify to deny that. You can say you agreed to all the terms. Make it sound like it wasn't as serious as the charges say. No, I said firmly. I'm not going to lie to protect someone who threw me out of the house. Emma went quiet for a moment. Then she delivered her next line with the chill of a practiced threat. You should think carefully. I know where you work. Your boss's name is Veronica, right? I froze. I don't think you can just start over and leave everything behind. Every action has consequences. If you won't help, don't blame me when the truth gets shared widely. Maybe people will want to know how you were involved. I took a deep breath. Are you threatening me? No, just a reminder. I hung up. My whole body trembled, not from fear, but from sheer outrage. My family didn't reach out because they felt remorse. They reached out because they were sinking. That night, I did something I used to fear. I walked into Director Veronica's office and told her everything, from the loan to the threatening calls. I laid out every detail clearly, providing copies of the contract, messages, and legal correspondence from my lawyer. Veronica listened in silence. When I finished, she asked just one question. Are you ready to keep moving forward, even if they try to drag you back? I nodded, eyes brimming. I don't want to go back. There's nothing left for me there. She smiled. Then don't worry. No one can use your past to break your future unless you let them. I walked out of her office feeling like I had finally locked the last door to my old life. No crack left for regret or fear to slip through. After Emma's threatening call, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up all night, eyes wide open in the dark, overwhelmed by a feeling I couldn't quite name. Not fear, not even anger. Just a deep weariness, like I was exhausted from always being the one to compromise. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with my attorney, Catherine Holmes, a sharp and composed woman I was lucky to be referred to by an old classmate. In a sunlit meeting room at her downtown Seattle office, I laid everything out, including the audio recording of Emma's call I had saved the night before. Catherine listened and nodded, eyes steady. This is harassment, threatening your reputation and employment. You don't have to put up with this, Avery. We'll send an official cease and desist notice to your family, and if they continue, we'll take appropriate legal action. I looked at her, my voice slightly shaky. Do you think they can actually hurt me? Only if you let them drag you back into that mess. And I don't think you will, Catherine said, her gaze unwavering. I left the office with a signed copy of the cease and desist letter, feeling just a little lighter, not because the threat had vanished, but because I knew I was finally protecting myself the right way, like an adult. 3 days later, Emma sent one final message to my old email. Thought you were the smart one. Turns out, you're just good at running. But don't forget, your name's still on that loan. When the house collapses, the cosigner goes down too. Good luck, sis. I forwarded the email to Catherine, and this time, I didn't cry. I also decided to talk directly to Veronica, my director at work. I didn't want any rumors or manipulation from my family to creep into the place where I was rebuilding my life. I walked into her office late Friday, as the golden sunset filtered through the white blinds, casting long stripes of light across the floor. Veronica, there's something I'd like to share, just so you're not caught off guard if anything comes up, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I told her everything, the loan, the fallout, the arrest, the threatening call from Emma. I finished with a simple sentence. I didn't do anything wrong, but if you need documentation, I'm ready to provide it. Veronica was quiet for a moment, then smiled. Not a polite smile, but one warm like sunshine after rain. Do you know why I hired you, Avery? I shook my head. Because in your first interview, when I asked how you'd handle an internal crisis, you said, I won't avoid it, but I also won't let anyone cross my boundaries. I knew then that you understood what boundaries are. I smiled, feeling a sudden, surprising lightness in my chest. You're doing the right thing. And I believe in you. No one can destroy what you've built here unless you let them, and I know you're not someone who gives up easily. I nodded, my voice catching. Thank you, really. Veronica stood up, walked around her desk, and placed a hand on my shoulder. Family can be the deepest wound, but you're building a new one for yourself, one with respect, with boundaries, with choice. And I'm proud of you. That night, I walked along the pier at Elliott Bay, the ocean breeze biting cold but oddly soothing. I caught a glimpse of myself in the window of a shop, no longer the trembling girl, desperate for approval from people who never knew how to love. I was me, and I didn't need anyone's permission to live by my values. I had just gotten back from my evening yoga class when I saw a woman sitting quietly outside my apartment. A familiar beige sweater, clutching a handbag close, eyes fixed on the floor of the porch as if afraid to look up. It was my mother. I froze for a few seconds. The first feeling wasn't pain or anger, it was surprise. I never thought she'd find the address. I had moved, changed my number, erased every contact from Sacramento. Then I remembered. Emma once worked for an insurance firm with access to tracking databases. Maybe someone had passed her the information. I set down my bag and slowly walked over. How have you been? She asked first. Her voice was raspier and weaker than I remembered. I didn't answer right away. I unlocked the door and motioned for her to come in. The apartment fell silent, like it was holding its breath. Mom sat on the sofa, fingers intertwined, eyes fixed on the throw pillow. I poured 2 cups of tea, handed her one, and sat down across from her. I never imagined seeing you again like this, I began. She nodded slightly, eyes rimmed red. Your father, he's waiting for a hearing, she said after a long pause. Emma moved back in with your grandparents to get away from the pressure. Caleb is still the same. No accountability. I stayed quiet, listening. Then she looked up, meeting my gaze for the first time. I know it's too late to say sorry, but I still want to. I'm sorry for not protecting you, for staying silent when I should have spoken. My chest tightened, as if someone was gently squeezing my heart. You let them treat me like a criminal in my own family, I said, my voice low but firm. When I fell, they stomped on me. When I stood up, they called it arrogance. She bowed her head. No arguments, no excuses, just, I was wrong. And I don't expect forgiveness, I just hope to keep whatever thread might still be left. I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. I'd dreamed of this scene hundreds of times. My mother showing up, apologizing, holding me. But real life had no soundtrack. No tears soaking into shoulders. Just 2 women sitting across from each other, both carrying invisible wounds. Do you still believe all the blame was mine? I asked. She shook her head. No, you didn't break anything. We were already cracked. I took a deep breath. If you really want to stay in contact, there will be conditions. Go ahead. No third-party communication, no relaying messages from anyone else in the family. Don't share anything about my life with them, and most importantly, I'm not the silent daughter you once knew. I will set boundaries, and if you cross them, this ends. She looked at me for a long time, then nodded. Good, I understand. We talked a bit more about Seattle's endless rain, my pottery classes, her starting therapy on her doctor's recommendation. For the first time, I saw my mother as a separate person, not just a quiet figure behind my father. Before she left, she paused by the door. "Can I hug you just once?" I hesitated for a few seconds, then stepped forward. The hug was short, gentle, not overly warm, but it wasn't the forced embrace of the past. In that moment, I felt something unexpected. I no longer needed my mother's approval to know my worth. She left, and I stood alone in my sunlit apartment. I lingered in silence, then smiled softly. Some threads don't need to be cut, just retied in the right place. My life in Seattle no longer felt like a refuge. Nearly a year in, I had stopped counting the days since I left Sacramento. I no longer flinched at unfamiliar texts, no longer dreamed of the old kitchen where my mother once silently watched my father berate me. I no longer lived like a shadow. On a late autumn Sunday afternoon, Sophia, my best friend and manager at Willow Bean Cafe, invited me to the first gathering of a mental healing group she co-founded with several local professionals. I meant to decline, but somehow I nodded. The meeting was held on the second floor of a community library, a small, cozy room with walls covered in artwork by people who had overcome depression. The theme that day was toxic families and the journey to reestablish boundaries. I didn't plan to speak, only to listen. But when a young woman 2 seats down broke into tears while talking about being blamed by her mother for her father leaving, I saw my 16-year-old self shaking in that old living room. And I raised my hand. My voice trembled at first, but the more I spoke, the lighter I felt. "I used to think that if I just tried harder I'd be loved," I said. "But a toxic family isn't about a lack of effort. It's about a lack of fairness." When I stopped talking, the room fell silent. Then came a round of applause, and in that moment I knew. My past was no longer a wound. It had become a guiding light. A few weeks later, I officially joined the group as a volunteer to support newcomers. I wasn't a therapist, but I knew how to listen. I knew how to recognize fear behind a forced smile. I knew what it meant to smile so others wouldn't feel bothered. One Friday afternoon, while I was setting out tea and snacks for the group, Jessica brought in a young guy. Guarded face, wary eyes. "This is Ethan, my younger brother," she said. "Can you talk to him one-on-one? He doesn't do well with public sharing." I nodded and invited Ethan into the hallway. He sat slowly, hands deep in the pockets of his hoodie. "I'm not really into this group stuff," he muttered, looking away. "Good. I used to think the same," I said, smiling gently. He glanced at me, surprised. "Really?" "Yeah. I used to believe that if I just got stronger, better, more successful, everything would be fine. But the more I tried, the more my family saw me as a problem. They said I was too much, blamed me whenever anything went wrong." Ethan looked up, his eyes suddenly clearer. "Same. I'm the youngest. But they always call me the troublemaker because I'm not like my brother." I nodded, not interrupting. He kept talking, starting with small bits, then unfolding the full story: favoritism, constant comparisons, the feeling of being invisible in his own home. "I used to think it was my fault," he said softly. "So did I replied. "Until I learned one thing: not all pain comes from love, some pain comes from control disguised as family." Ethan sat silently for a while, then nodded. That night, I got a message from Jessica. "I've never seen Ethan open up to anyone like that. Thank you, really." I looked at the screen and smiled. I was once the child hoping for a hug from my mother in a cold house. Now I was someone who could open my arms to a soul falling apart. I can't save everyone, but I can stop someone from feeling as alone as I once did. Late spring in Seattle always holds something magical. Soft blue skies, warm but gentle sunshine, and air that feels freshly washed by cherry blossom petals riding the breeze. I was sitting on the small porch of my apartment, holding a cup of hot mint tea, with Theo, the little black dog who had stayed by my side through the darkest days, curled up next to me. It had been exactly 1 year since I packed my bags and boarded a one-way flight out of Sacramento. 1 year of not living for others' approval. 1 year of learning how to breathe, how to say no without guilt, and how to love myself fully. Now, I had a steady job in content creation at a human-centered tech company. I managed community projects, helping to build mental wellness programs for employees and people in challenging situations. I still spent time each week with Sophia's healing group. Now I even led small discussion circles for young people wounded by family. I had friends, not the hangout just for fun kind, but people who listened and didn't need me to wear a mask. Jessica and I often went to the weekend farmers market, cracking up over silly stuff as we picked out vegetables. Sophia every month came up with a new challenge. This month was no complaining for 7 days. Last month was write a letter to your 10-year-old self. So I had a home, just a small apartment, but every corner reflected me. The yellow velvet pillow I chose because it looks cheerful. The ceramic tea set I made myself. The abstract paintings I created when I couldn't sleep. And perhaps most importantly, I had peace. Not because life was perfect, but because I no longer fought myself every day. That afternoon, while checking my email, my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. No pictures, no reminders, just a single line. Thinking of you today, hope you're well. I stared at the screen for a few minutes. No apology, no digging up the past, just a sentence, soft as breath, yet powerful enough to stir a part of my memory long gone cold. I didn't reply right away. I didn't feel the need to rush. But I knew my mother was learning to love again, in a language she was never taught. I set the phone down, stretched, then stepped out to the porch with Theo. The breeze played through my hair, carrying the scent of fresh grass and the faint sounds of a nearby park. I thought of the Avery from a year ago. The girl curled up on the living room floor, clutching a bank loan contract, full of fear. If I could, I'd go back and hold her and say, "It won't be easy, but you'll be okay. You'll start over, not for anyone else, but because you deserve it." And now, I want to say to anyone listening to this story, you have the right to choose yourself. You have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to walk away from what hurts you, even if the ones causing the pain share your last name. And most of all, you have the right to peace. I'm not perfect. I still have bad days, moments when I look back and think, what if? But I no longer live in those what ifs. I'm living, with all my scars, all my light, and all my truth. Because I am Avery. Not the shadow of my family, not the stand-in for their mistakes. I am me. And I am free. Avery's story is a powerful reminder that all of us have the right to choose ourselves, even when facing toxic family ties or the invisible chains of the past. No one is born to be a sacrifice for someone else's mistakes. When you dare to set boundaries, to leave, and to begin again, you don't just find peace, you become a light for those still lost. Life doesn't begin with someone else's approval. It begins when you believe you are worthy. What do you think about Avery's journey? Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more moving and powerful family stories.